Good afternoon. We're starting our session 3, Building Resilience in Education. May I invite our panelists, please, to join the floor, please. Ms. Brooke Al-Amin, Mr. Ziad Shaban, Dr. Hana Al-Ghali, Dr. Malik Tabbal, and our last panelist, Ms. Waad Slim. Hello, everyone. My name is Masa Mufti. I'm the co-founder and chair of Sumbula Group for Education and Development, an NGO that provides education support for Syrian refugees in Beqa, with special focus on quality and sustainability. I'm delighted today to be moderating this special panel with very special as well speakers who will be sharing, each one of them, about their research, project, intervention initiatives in the area of education. I'll start by introducing each one of them. Ms. Brooke Al-Amin, she's the Civic Engagement Program and Administrator at the Center for Civic Engagement and Community Service at the AUB. The center builds bridges between the university, local stakeholders, humanitarian agencies, and policymakers in order to facilitate change in marginalized landscapes. Our next panelist will be Mr. Ziad Shaban, who is the Continuing Education Center, CEC Director at the Regional External Program, REP, at the AUB. Mr. Shaban also started his AUB career in the Faculty of Engineering and Architecture, where he also served as a consultant for several AUB REP projects in Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Sudan. Under his leadership, CEC implemented major change management initiative, including go-to-market model, the actual catalog and type of offerings, and above all, the CEC community engagement. Dr. Hana Al-Ghali, Program Director of Education and Youth Policy Research Program at the Issam Faris Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs at AUB. She's also the lecturer at the Department of Education. She leads research projects on education policy across the MENA region, focusing on issues of access to basic education and equity in tertiary education. Dr. Malik Tabbal, am I pronouncing your name properly? Okay. Malik Tabbal is the director of the Leadership, Equity, and Diversity Initiative, the LEAD initiative at AUB. He's also the provost designee on the USAID University Scholarship Program, the Abdullah Al Ghurair Foundation for Education, STEM Scholarship Program, in addition to being a professor of physics. Should I mention all the awards that you have received? And quite an award, has received many awards that are very prestigious. And finally, Ms. Waad Slim, she is the Mobile University for Health Project Coordinator at the Global Health Institute at AUB. She also coordinates all activity initiatives in the GHI Academy, working closely with the Academy Coordinator. She has her background is in nutrition, and she has recently completed her master's in human nutrition at AUB with a special focus on pregnancy, diet, and lifestyle. Having said that, I will start with our first panelist, Ms. Brooke Al-Amin, who will be talking today about Ms. Al-Amin will be talking today about the initiatives and project that the Center for Civic Engagement and Community Service has implemented since the Syria Relief Project was launched in 2012 to offer direct support to Syrian refugee and host communities. To name few of those, the Portable Ghata School, the Blended College Readiness Program, and Science Education. So I will give the floor to Ms. Brooke Al-Amin.
First, I want to thank the Issam Faris Institute for organizing this conference, opportunity for all of us to learn more about each other's work, engage in some important discussions about what's now become a somewhat lengthy response to the Syrian refugee crisis. And today I'm going to be focusing on one of the main elements of our center's work around education for resilience in a protracted crisis. I need to get closer to the mic. Okay, tie it. First, I just want to very briefly introduce our center, which basically builds bridges between the university and relevant stakeholders, policymakers, humanitarian agencies, and marginalized communities to implement change for better communities that is also, while at the same time creating and facilitating opportunities for transformative education for AUB students and leveraging the expertise of AUB faculty members. So therefore, our operational framework has two main pillars. First, we focus on providing, for example, for all AUB students, we connect them with volunteering and internship opportunities in credible local community serving organizations. For AUB scholarship students, and Dr. Tabal may speak about this briefly in his presentation about the LEAD initiative. For many of the full scholarship students at AUB, they actually engage in a mandatory and extensive civic engagement leadership development framework that goes from beginning with volunteering and training workshops to a capstone final student-led community service project that they do at the end of their undergraduate years. And then we also take AUB's expertise and apply it to community development projects. And what we aim to do is to innovate and pilot new ideas and to potentially identify scalable solutions to some of the most pressing challenges. We were doing this work across Lebanon before the Syrian crisis began. With the onset of the Syrian crisis, of course, then we took on also engaging in the relief work around the Syrian crisis and its impacts on refugees as well as the host communities themselves. I'm assuming everybody in this room is well familiar with the broad context of the Syrian refugee crisis. I'm not going to go into that now. But I want to briefly tell our story of how we went from basically how we evolved from a clothing drive in response to a blizzard to comprehensive educational projects, which are serving thousands of refugee children and youth annually, and portable campuses across the Bekaa region. So after the 2013 blizzard, which was devastating for the refugee community, and many of you probably remember, many of AUB students wanted to respond, and staff and faculty as well. And the most immediate thing that they arrived at as a solution was a clothing drive. And they asked us as the center to help facilitate that. They then realized that they also wanted to work on community awareness, and we supported them in that as well. Through the clothing drive and the distribution of the clothing, the AUB students, the faculty we were working with, and our own staff came into direct contact and engagement with refugee families. And we became more aware of potential strategic responses that could build on the refugee community's strengths, as well as the obvious gaps in services being provided to them. The intense desire of refugee children themselves, who we met, to continue their disrupted education, and the huge numbers of out-of-school children, even after the opening of the public school second shifts, led us to focus our efforts in refugee relief work on education. There are a number of causes, multiple and complex causes, for the the fact that more than the majority of Syrian children are still out of school, and more than 95% of high school age students are out of school. And these range from poverty and the connected push for child labor, limited mobility, demand which exceeds supply in some particular areas, prejudice faced by refugee children, lack of psychosocial support, language barriers, and an inadequate built environment in the non-formal refugee education sector. So as an AUB center, we aim to develop educational programs that promote resilience around the following principles. We aim to develop innovative ideas that build on the expertise of faculty. There's faculty in the room here who've worked with us on some of our Ghata projects. We aim to develop contextualized solutions that are also potentially scalable, which is a challenge to find that balance, but we aim for that. We don't want to pick up solutions from abroad and just drop them on the communities around us that have very specific strengths and challenges. We aim for high quality education. We aim that the education that children and youth are receiving in our programs is as good as the education that any person in this room would want for their own children. We don't think that displaced people or poor people or marginalized people deserve any less of an education than everyone's child. We aim for holistic solutions that look at the whole child, not just their academic performance, but if they're struggling in school, what might be issues that are contributing to that, providing nutrition, support, healthy snacks. We promote, with the support of the Department of Education, we promote student-centered learning models with our teachers, where the young people become actively engaged in their learning. They're not just rote recipients of, passive recipients of rote learning. And we aim to have a strengths or an assets-based approach. So we look at the communities and the families and the individuals and the young people that we work with as coming with strength and resilience already. They're not empty canvases. The young people that we work with have taught me so much, and their intense desire to continue their educations and the barriers that they've already overcome and the barriers that they're prepared and willing to continue to overcome, that we try to build on that. We try to create environments that recognize that and that support that and that create environments in which they can thrive. So this leads me to the actual structure of the Ghata, which means cover in Arabic. This was a portable school structure designed by our director, Rabia Shibli. And the idea, it reflects all of the principles I was just discussing. So in actuality, the idea for how to construct it came from looking at refugees' own shelter building practices. It's portable. It can be assembled and disassembled one unit can be assembled and disassembled in a day, and it can be moved. And because of this, the government actually passed a decree allowing this structure to be used in educational projects. So we were able to find municipalities that were comfortable with these schools for refugees being built. But obviously, it becomes a much more normal school environment than schooling in a tent, which is what was happening in the non-formal education sector at the beginning of the crisis. It can endure severe weather, and it has natural lighting and other architectural and sort of engineering factors that make it a healthy and safe learning environment. A typical school campus has classrooms, offices in our middle schools. We have science labs. They also have a large outdoor area, like a courtyard in the middle, that students use as a playground and that can also be used for community settings. And a typical Ghata school might serve up to 800 students in 2 shifts, or 300 or 400 students in 1 shift. So what does it look like when we build a school campus, which can happen in a week? We lay very simple concrete bases. They're not actually foundations. And the structure goes up within a week. So, thank you. Okay, these are just some pictures of the structures. These are all in the Baka area. So we're providing primary education, lower secondary education, college preparation, and we have some new directions, which I'll talk about in a minute. We're reaching over 5,000 refugee children and youth annually with our local community partners. The schools that we support and that are run by the Kayani Foundation have been granted Ministry of Education accreditation, which was a first for a non-formal education provider. And I was definitely helped by the intense capacity building provided by the AUB Department of Education. You can see that we've worked with the Department of Education, with Nutrition and Food Sciences, with the Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences and the Architecture and Design. Many AUB students and volunteers have been involved. Our primary community partner is the Kayani Foundation, and we have external funding from Reach Out to Asia. We recently launched a project for science education, working with the Department of Education and the Chemistry Department to provide high-quality science education and to address some of the barriers that refugee young people face in learning science and math and English. So using hands-on activities and teacher capacity building to improve the quality of the science and math education provided in 2 all-girls refugee schools in Baka. And our partner on this project, also the Kayani Foundation, recently got a grant to establish 2 new lower secondary schools that will be for boys and girls, and they're planning, based on the success of the 2 labs that we built in their girls' schools, they'll be including science labs in the new schools that they're building right now. Finally, we've been working, we're in our 2nd year of what's called the Padilea project, which is a partnership for digital learning and increased access. And we're doing an intensive college readiness program for young people in Baka, primarily Syrian refugee high school graduates. And we are preparing them to enter college. This year, 18 of our graduates from last year's cohort have secured scholarships to attend various universities in the Baka. And we hope to, in the current cohort of 55 students, we hope to increase that number greatly and hopefully even help some students find their way to AUB. That project's a partnership with King's College London, as well as a Jordanian university, which is doing a mirror program with refugees from the Al-Zatari camp in northern Jordan, and an online learning providers, FutureLearn and Chiron Higher Education. And again, we engage many departments across AUB as faculty experts on curriculum development and supervising our local instructors. One comment I want to quickly make about local instructors, one of the ways our programs actually work and build upon the strengths of the local host communities and the refugee communities is that we employ local teachers and local instructors. And the capacity building that we provide those teachers benefits Lebanese institutions that they work in. For example, many of our part-time instructors at the college level are also teaching in other Lebanese universities in Baka. And we're giving them capacity building, and they're applying those skills in our programs as well as in their other teaching engagements with other universities. And in the primary schools and lower secondary schools, 70% of the teachers are Syrian. And they're receiving intensive capacity building from AUB. And we hope that this way we're also contributing to the educational system that will be rebuilt in Syria if and when, if those teachers decide to return to Syria, they will take those skills with them. Quickly, just the new directions we're taking. We're taking the lessons learned in the Ghata schools with the Kayani Foundation and applying them in a new educational program called the Maymuna Education in northern Baka and Akkar. We're developing a psychosocial support program that will be implemented in the Al-Maymuna schools and the Kayani schools that will involve a training of trainers and then a training of teachers. So building the capacity of psychosocial support experts in Lebanon as well as the teachers themselves. And we're also piloting a digital education program for primary education, which involves tablets. So we aim with a holistic vision to engage students, parents, teachers, communities in designing educational environments that enable the young people to thrive. And this is one of the schools that we co-operate with the Kayani Foundation. And these are some of the students. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barouk. I'd like to invite now on stage Mr. Ziad Sha'ban, who will be sharing with us the challenges and lessons learned from the Continuing Education Center initiative in providing certified continued education for Syrian refugees that improve their skills, abilities for better employability. Mr. Sha'ban, the floor floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Just for those who don't know about the Continuing Education Center at AUB, the center was established in 1970, and what we do is we provide continuing education in forms of workshops, courses, certificates, and diploma. Having said so, our participation in this crisis is providing continuing education for the Syrian refugees, which is, if we put it in context, it will be helping resilience for these students. Okay. All right. The Continuing Education Center, as I said, has several programs to serve the community, which is mandated by the administration to have several programs to support the community. So some of these programs are, I think some of you know, the University for Seniors at the Continuing Education Center. We have also the Next Step program, which is for Down syndrome students. And recently we have the Syrian Refugee Training Program, which is funded by one of our trustees. Just to share my experience in this, I will be answering some guiding questions, starting by why did we do it? And then what were the challenges, how did we do it, and what did we learn? To start with, why did we do it? First of all, we have to answer for this. The first one is that, as I said before, it's a mandate from the university. It's actually in their strategic plan, Objective 5, to have initiative in each department to serve the community. The Continuing Education Center in the Regional External Program was providing this service. The second objective is to rebuild, to help the participant, the Syrian refugee participant, to rebuild their country and also to enhance their condition of lives. In this objective, we have two kinds of impacts. We have a short-term impact, which is immediately to enhance the life condition of the participant. And the second one is it's a long-term impact, which will help these participants to rebuild their country with the skills that they're gonna gain from these programs. Okay, what were the challenges? To build a program to serve a certain category of students have many challenges. To start with is, what are the topics that we are going to select that will serve the objectives that we started with? The donor was keen to introduce teaching certificates in this program because he was one of the one that support education and believe that education will be a main skills that will help rebuild Syria. So what we did choose is we have 5 teaching certificates, and the challenge of this is the teaching certificate that we've chosen was to be based on the Syrian curricula in order for the Syrian teachers, when they go back, to help so they have the knowledge of the Syrian curricula. The second one, we decided to choose 2 professional certificates. One is project management, which will be needed in every project that will help reconstruct Syria. And second is the office management, which is in each, we will have a lot of companies that will be open, and we'll have a lot of opportunities for these participants to work in these offices. And then, based on our previous experience, we realized that English language, as many of my colleagues mentioned, is a barrier. So we decided to introduce English language for 5 levels for those participants. Okay, so what we need to do was to build the team. The problem with these challenges is that we have a very short time. When we first pitch using our previous experience with the Spark, which is a Dutch NGO, we received a will from the donor to provide a donation to have a full program. So we have the window of 3 months to come up with a proposal and to come up with the team and to come up with all logistics needed to do this. So when we start building a proposal, I think most of the AUB guys here know that when you build a proposal for a certain project, to have the financial model, to have the expense management, to have all of these is really a very hard task. So we managed to build the proposal in order to be accepted by the donor and also to be easy to implement in this very short time. So what the main objective is for us was to define the target participant. You know, the participant that you all talked from the beginning of this conference were the refugees living in camps or school students that all need these supports. But what about the Syrians that have finished their college, that were studying in the university and they didn't have the chance to continue their studies? There are a lot of them. And only in Beirut, we decided to have the first 2 years of the program in Beirut and the remaining 3 in the different area of Lebanon. So we decided to focus on the students who graduated from universities and with students who were in the university that were not able to continue. But to do this, and after defining the target market, what will be the mean to reach out to these participants? It is very difficult to, I think most of you will go to UNCHR, will have to go to some NGOs, and there are some limitations, especially if you have a very target market. So what we did, and here we can say that the state that if you provide service to others, this will lead to good things. So the previous program, in addition to it was the initiation of this new grant, we reach out to our graduate of these programs that they form something called Student University Forum that are all graduate of our program. And they help us reach out to these students because nobody knows about their friends except them. So they have a huge connection, a huge network of all their friends that have the similar states and they need to continue their education. And above that, what they had experienced, it was really life-changing for them. So they needed to provide this to their colleagues. So they help us in all the logistics, the advertisings, the preparation for the interviews, preparation for the orientation sessions, and also with the communication with these students. For our advertising, we need to be fair and we need to reach out to most of the participants who fulfill these criteria. So we used magazines, we used social media, and we also reach out to several NGOs in Lebanon to help us reach out to the biggest pool of these potential participants. But now, after having said so, we will be receiving a lot of numbers. What will be the selection criteria? You know, we also used the lesson learned from the Spark initiative, and we realized that we need to have in the class homogeneous people. Let's say they must all have degrees, they have a certain level of English, they have a certain need, and above all, they have the time to do that. You will be surprised to say, okay, we're providing a scholarship for you, what about the time? All our potential participants are working students. Most of them are working or even serving in NGOs or even studying in other universities or even pursuing other things because they are not living in camps. They are living in houses that they need to provide rent. They have to work on all of this. So it was very difficult to find the time and the people who can serve, who can provide the time needed. How did we do it? First of all, we need to set the expectation. You cannot just invite any student to come to AUB and start taking courses. We have to inform them about the policies. You have inform them about the attendance policies, about the smoking policy, about the grading system, and about all what's needed for them to know. So we prepared an orientation session for them, and we set their expectation, what's required from them. The second part was how we are going to collect all these documents. Most of you know that, okay, they have a degree, so we need a degree. They have the residency, we need the residency. So we built up a portal to collect all this information, and we start on working. So what we did is, for the teaching certificate, we did create 5 new certificates in Arabic based on the Syrian curriculum, as I said, in the support of one of the expert from Syrian education system. Then from the office management, associate project management, English language, we need to tailor them in order to meet the need of these participants. Then, as I said, finding the right schedule was really a hassle. So we need to open our center all Sundays. We need to have classes after 8, so we can accommodate the time that those participants can provide. And then we need to have like a follow-up mechanism. These programs are very demanding. So at the end of each course, because our certificate is made of 4 courses, at the end of each course, all the coordinators will be meeting and will be discussing the lesson learned and what's need to be adjusted or what's need to be fixed. What did we learn? Based on our experience, it's very important to have a two-way communication open all the time with these certificates. So we have office hours for them, we have special email, we have special meeting request for them to apply at any time. Also, we needed to be very firm regarding the attendance, especially after our accreditation. We need to track the early departure and late arrival. And as I said before, for the professional certification, we need a certain level of English. So we introduced a placement test for those students in order to be on a certain level so they can take the certification. And also we decided, because we have a lot of no-show in the first cohort, we have to have some kind of a waiting list for each certificate to be able to accommodate for any departure. Some data that we have from the collection of information that we did. You can see from the certificate that they have, you have 40% of those students who have finalized their BS. And you have also the majority of them that have the high school. So that's why we targeted these kind of holders. Second, if you look at what are the topics that you need to enroll in, we find out that English was the most important one that they need to enroll, in addition to the project management, which is also help them find better jobs. And from the data that we have, we realized that 12.3% of those who applied already have a scholarship, so we did not provide them with a scholarship. Just to mention here, our certification, what we do provide, is signed by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education, and then again also sign it for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's why it can help them find better job. And we have a lot of success stories. Some of them continue their education, some of them find jobs, some of them enrolled in community service in schools, and we have all the story, and I'll be glad to share it with any one of you. So thank you.
Thank you all for being so punctual. I'll give the floor to Dr. Hana Al-Ghali now, who will be presenting the results of a series of studies and intervention on access to tertiary education for refugees in a number of host countries in the MENA region, with special focus on equity and sustainability. Dr. Hana.
Thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to speak at this event, and for the organizers as well. Sometimes we all work at the same institution, but it is not all the time that we have the chance to learn about each other's work, and this is the best forum, I think, to bring us together and allow us to learn more about each other's work. So, as Masa mentioned, we within the Aysam Paris Institute have been doing a lot of work on refugee higher education as well, but mostly higher education. And we have, since 2014, we've learned a lot about the challenges facing young people trying to access higher education. And what we have also learned is that these challenges have not changed much since 2014. So we are now, 2018, the challenges are still more or less the same. And so what we have started doing at the Aysam Paris Institute is working towards addressing these challenges rather than working towards learning more about what are the challenges facing the youth trying to access higher education. And so some of the projects that we've started engaging in is, for example, one that looks at building capacity among Syrian teachers who are engaged with youth and children, because they are ultimately the ones who are able to impact those young people trying to learn in the Syrian refugees trying to learn, addressing their needs in terms of psychosocial, curricular, academic, and whatnot. We've also just launched a new project that addresses the coping skills among youth within higher education, and in that we're trying to understand better what are the coping strategies that they employ in order to get better integrated into the system of higher education. This, for example, addresses one of the challenges that emerged multiple times in our studies, which is the difficulty or challenge of integration into higher education settings, which, by the way, is not unique to the refugees only. It is very common among vulnerable Lebanese as well, and this is one of the key findings from all the studies that we've done. Another project that we've also started working on, and we're continuing now to work on, is one that addresses the recognition of qualifications or credentials among vulnerable youth and refugee youth. One that is what we are working on in collaboration with UC Davis, which is called the Article 26 Backpack, but another one that we're working on with a European organization called Nukut, and Lebanon will be the first to adapt what is known as the European Qualifications Passport for the recognition of the qualifications and credentials of refugees. Well, I can go on and on, but I will stop at some point. Just the last one that I wanted to mention is that we are also working on developing what is known as the Syrian Teacher Academy, which works towards the development of or capacity building of Syrian teachers in Lebanon. All of these projects that I'm mentioning aim towards creating durable futures for Syrian refugees. How? We are trying to provide them with the skills needed and the knowledge needed in order to address their current situation, but also the prospects for their future. So before I start talking more about one specific project that I wanted to feature in this presentation called the iDream, which I'll come to towards the end, I wanted to talk a little bit about the context, which is relevant to higher education specifically. And in that, most of us in this room, as Brooke mentioned, know the context very well in terms of Lebanon being the highest concentration of refugees per 1,000 inhabitants, making the Syrian population constitute almost 33% of the total population of the country. Currently, it is reported that there are around 951,000 Syrian refugees registered. This is according to UNHCR, the latest is October 31st. And what is interesting to know is that there has been around 140,000 births reported since between 2013 and 2018. Why is this important to higher education? Well, because many of those kids are now in the education pipeline. And so many of those children are now in grade 1, which is 6 years old, and a few years later, they're going to be making their way, or they're supposed to be making their way towards higher education, although this may be quite far-fetched in what it may seem, but this is where we start working towards higher education and basic education. Out of these 951,000, we have around 500,000 who are children between the ages of 3 and 18. Again, these are supposed to be the ones who constitute the pipeline towards higher education. Out of those 951,000, there's 100,000 who are between the ages of 19 to 24. These are actually the ones who are supposed to be in the universities. But this is not, so if you look at these numbers, it means there are about more than 50% of the Syrian population is supposed to be in educational institutions in Lebanon. But this is not the case. There is only about 2.4% of the secondary school age Syrian youth in Lebanon who are enrolled in secondary schools. And only 6% of those university age Syrians in Lebanon who are actually enrolled in universities. But as a researcher, I look more closely at these numbers. And I must say that these numbers, at least the ones for the university, are kind of camouflage numbers. Why? Well, because this 6% does not only address the refugees. So this 6% is not refugees. It is Syrians. Universities report to the ministry how many Syrians they have enrolled at the universities. They do not report how many refugees, because there's no way for them to identify that in a way or another. Especially if you go to the Lebanese university that has around 1,400 Syrian students. They cannot identify how many of those are refugees. And so again, these numbers are not very, I would say, accurate, because the 100,000 we're talking about there are the registered refugees. But this 6% does not necessarily reflect that these are refugees. Again, the trend in enrollment in primary education is a positive one for the refugees as it is increasing. And it is expected, or it is foreseen to continue to be increasing. But then again, I go back to the numbers issue, which I have a problem with, because this 250,000, or let's look at last year, this 213,000 is not a number that tells you how many of the Syrian kids are actually in schools. These are how many have been registered at the school at the beginning of the year. It is very interesting to look at the retention rate, to look at how many of those kids actually stayed in school. And then it would be, then we would be able to address some of the issues that need to be addressed. When we look at the afternoon shifts, it's not as a pleasant as an image, because in the afternoon shift, the higher you go in the grades, the lower the enrollment rates. And this is very significant for higher education, because the longer you stay in school in terms of, if you're moving up the ladder in terms of the grades, it means that the higher the chances are that you would actually make it to university. And so seeing such a graph is quite telling in terms of who is going to be coming out of those refugees to university. So what is going on in the higher education scheme? We have seen a relatively stable enrollment rate among the refugees, or I must say the Syrians in higher education in Lebanon. And this is thanks to many initiatives that have been introduced in terms of scholarships and initiatives to enroll Syrians in higher education. But the question is here, how long will this number be sustained? I will finish very quickly. How long will this number be sustained, given what I have presented in terms of data on what is going on in the pipeline to higher education? This is a very important thing. So the good news is that the current and future environment is a fertile land. There's a lot we can do, and Lebanon has done quite a lot in terms of addressing the system changes in terms of education in Lebanon because of the crisis, for more and better opportunities for the youth themselves, the refugees, but also the Lebanese youth. The challenging news is we don't know how the dramatic social, economic, political, and technological shifts will actually impact the refugees and their education. We know that the political situation is quickly changing and rapidly, whether in Lebanon or back in Syria, and this presents a lot of uncertainty. And so it looks like not much is being done to kind of bridge this gap, between secondary and higher education. We hear a lot that those who make it to secondary more likely will make it to higher education. But the problem is this collapsing pipeline to higher education, where not many kids are actually making it. And so why is this important? Because the population in Syria is also decreasing. And so we keep on talking about the population in Lebanon. It is also important to think about what's going on back in Syria. And so the population back in 2010 was around 20 million. It has decreased since then because of the war, and it is projected that it will continue to decrease. And what is interesting for us in higher education is that the percentage of the population that is the youth, the target of higher education, is projected to fall to only 18% inside Syria. And so this presents more of an importance to talk about building the capacity of youth outside Syria, whether they're going to support Syria later on, inside or from outside, but this is important to build the capacity of the Syrian youth. And so also another important figure is that 91% of the primary kids were enrolled in primary school in 2011, while this has dropped to 37% in 2015. I'm ending. And so again, this pipeline to higher education is not only a problem in Lebanon for the Syrians, but also inside Syria. And this is the same in terms of statistics related to the holders of baccalaureate. It has dropped from 32% to about 18% of those who are holding baccalaureate degrees, or the 12th grade degree that would allow them to access higher education. So for us, what to do in terms of bridging this gap. One of the projects, I talked about many projects that we're working on, but one particular project that we've just launched is called the iDream, which is an innovative design and research, education, and mentorship, which is a pre-college mentoring program for youth, both Lebanese and Syrian, in public schools. And the idea is to bring these young people from the public schools in grades 10, 11, 12 into the university to be mentored by students at the university in the different disciplines. For one, this project will empower the students with the skills and knowledge necessary to be successful at their school, but later on at the universities. It promotes social and academic growth for the students. And very important component is that it introduces the students who are at the school to the university programs, scholarships, and opportunities. I mean, you would not believe it how many of those vulnerable kids are not aware of the opportunities that exist that they may engage in to bring them into higher education. And to develop community ambassadors who can carry on the skills they learn and the knowledge or information about these. And so I won't talk more about the importance of investing in higher education, but what I wanted to say is that, tertiary education for Syrian refugees and Syrians and vulnerable kids is not a luxury. Tertiary education and investing in higher education will allow the the discrepancy that we have in access to higher education and education opportunities to end, whether it's between the rich or the poor, or the refugees and the non-refugees. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hannah. And now the floor is for Dr. Tabal, who will talk also today about the specific role of the LEAD initiative in fostering leadership skills, civic engagement, and community service throughout the scholarship program for refugee students, funded by all these, the MEPI, the Ghoreir Foundation, and others, and how the impact and the success of those programs can attract and increase the number of refugee students through current and new grants. The floor is yours, Dr. Tabal.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me today to this forum. Second time I participate. It's always very exciting to be here, and it's always great to see colleagues who are few meters away from us, or few tens of meters away from us, who are doing work that will be extremely relevant to our scholarship programs. I'm going to basically describe the Leadership, Equity, and Diversity Initiative at AUB, and how it can, and what role it can play in terms of bringing in refugees into universities in Lebanon. That's briefly the outline of the talk. A quick overview: what is LEAD and what are its programs, the key enablers to LEAD's success and to the success of these programs. They are intimately related because LEAD's success strictly depends on the success of those scholarship programs. And where do we go from here in what relates to the refugee issues in Lebanon? So essentially, what LEAD is, it is a collaborative platform that ensures coordination, efficiency, and synergy among the various entities at AUB in order essentially to serve the scholarship programs at AUB. The scholarship programs are listed here. The top 4 ones are programs that have been going on for a certain number of years. And the remaining 2, the MEPTL and the ELC, Education for Leadership in Crisis Program, are programs that have just started. They don't have students yet. Whereas these 4 programs have been going on for quite some time. The idea of LEAD is to have these programs coordinate among themselves, coordinate with the rest of the AUB units and outside AUB, in order to make sure that we implement and we succeed efficiently in implementing our programs. All these programs, essentially, they support students coming from underserved communities in their transition to the university. And in all these programs, there is always a very important community-based component to these scholarships. We always tell the students that these are not strictly academic scholarships. There is a very significant component of community work and community service that is mandatory to the students enrolled in these programs. The vision of LEAD, essentially it started 3 years ago in 2016. Professor Hala Muhtasib started as the director. It was an initiative from the Office of the President and that of the Provost. Brooke herself worked a lot on LEAD at the very beginning. Then there has been a lull for about a year. And now LEAD is picking up again. And what you see here is the common offering of these programs. So we always offer full tuition support. Mostly it's the organizations that pay, but also AUB does contribute with its cost share. We give living and other expenses for the student. A lot of academic support through AUB's advisors and beyond. We help a lot in terms of transition to the workplace and in psychosocial support, and there is the civic engagement component that I had just mentioned. The goal is really to have graduates that eventually will positively impact their community and instill humanistic values in their society. It is the strategic goal of these programs. So I'm going to go relatively fast over the 5 programs. For each program I am showing a link and the person who is in charge, because frankly I don't have the time to go into these different programs. I'm starting with the MEPI, the Middle Eastern Initiative, Partnership Initiative. Essentially it targets high school seniors from the Middle East and North Africa. And it is the first program to have started about, I think, more than 10 years ago. Started under the late Dr. Randa Antoun. Currently, the program director is Hani Hassan. And MEPI has a continuous stream of students. There are some Lebanese, but most of them are coming from the Arab world, getting into AUB. And as I said, as for others, there is always the issue of nurturing leadership skill and the spirit of civic engagement among our students. The USAID, the USP, and the Refugee Scholarship Support, I myself was director of the USAID USP for several years. This is initially started as a program that was earmarked for public school students, Lebanese public school students. As of this year, the program will be accepting non-Lebanese students residing in Lebanon, having refugee status. And a bit like the MEPI, it has a significant civic engagement component. And additionally, students have to be engaged and implement community service projects in this program. Current director, Samar Harous, who's also director of the University Preparatory Program. Starting at roughly the same time as USAID USP is the MasterCard Foundation program. Again, the same format. However, in this case, scholarships are offered for both graduate and undergraduate students. The program started in the Faculty of Health Sciences. Now it's under the Office of the Provost. Very particular about this program is that the scholarships are not only open to Lebanese nationals and refugees and displaced living in Lebanon, but also a significant student population of this program are nationals coming from sub-Saharan Africa, which in itself brings in a significant amount of diversity to this campus. Program director has been there for quite some time. After Dr. Rima Hafifi now is Mrs. Maha Haidar. The youngest of those, the Al Ghurair Foundation program, it is essentially for needy Arab students. It also, like the previous program, has both a graduate and an undergraduate component. However, this program is, however, restricted to the STEM major, funded by the Abdullah Al Ghurair Foundation for Education. I am the director caretaker of this program, which is at its 3rd cohort now. What I like, frankly, about this program, it is the only program that is entirely funded by an Arabic foundation, whereas the others are funded by foreign foundation, U.S. Department of State or the MasterCard Foundation. So it's definitely a program that is strategically very important to AUB. So these are essentially the 4 running programs. There are 2 new programs that have just started now with their student selection. So eventually we'll have students from these 2 programs coming in September 2019. The Education for Leadership in Crisis program that targets Afghan female students for undergraduate studies that will be brought from Afghanistan into AUB with the support of a local NGO. Dr. Carmen Jaha, whom I think you all know very well, is in charge. And the second one is another MEPI program, so it's also supported by MEPI. However, this one is restricted to graduate students, hoping to bring in about 20 graduate students from the MENA region. And it is the aim of this program is to bring these students who will be doing research on topics related to gender study, in addition to the usual civic engagement and leadership activities. Current Associate Provost Zahir Dawi is in charge. So this gives you an idea about the vast portfolio of programs we have. Needless to say that these programs wouldn't succeed without the very, very close partnership we have with the Center of Civic Engagement and Community Service, as well as all the AUB supporting units ranging from the Office of Grant and Contracts, the first office we see when we actually write the grant, all the way to all the others' office until we reach actually the alumni office, and the support of the AUB academic unit. So we always tell people that this is purely a collective effort. Everybody at AUB has to help to succeed in this program, otherwise it would not work. So what is particularly interesting about this program is that if you look at them, they're very diverse, yet they are complementary. You have for Lebanese, for Syrians, for Africans, and so on. The total number of students is close to 500. Okay, so it's quite a significant amount and increasing. Okay. It is not a biased opinion just to say that these have been a resounding success. I mean, you can look at some of the indicators. An extremely high student retention and graduation rate. We're talking about below 3% in some programs. The increased diversity within the campus, which is also a top priority for AUB currently. Increased student participation in community-based activities. The people, our colleagues in civic engagement and other outreach programs can witness to that. And we're more and more trying to institutionalize all that we have learned and all the good practices that we have learned from this program in implementing transformative education across the campus, not only for our scholarship students, and now we're even striving to introduce service learning and community engagement within the academic curriculum. My last slide is really mostly open for discussion. I mean, I hope I've given a quick overview, a good overview of our lead programs. So where do we go from here? Already some of the programs have refugee students in them, such as the MasterCard Foundation and the MEPI. USAID is going also towards that direction. There are more and more scholarship within these programs, or number of students earmarked for refugee students. We feel that AUB is now, after many, many years of working in this domain and in doing this kind of, or implementing such scholarship program, we feel that AUB is in a prime position to play a major role in refugee education at the university level. And all that we have learned from this program, whether it's preparing and preparing the students before coming to AUB or at their beginning of their stay at AUB, their integration and inclusion within the campus, supporting them at all levels, not only academic. The work with the civic engagement and other outreach program at AUB, and finally career readiness, really puts us in a prime position to increase the number of such scholarships. And we are hoping to reach out to other agencies in order to bring in more of such scholarship students. Okay, with this, I think I'm done. So
We have now our final last panelist, Ms. Waad Slim, who will be also talking about the Mobile University for Health project, quite an innovative educational model for building healthcare system and a workforce among lay refugees and host communities as a solution to compensate for the loss of opportunities for continuing education due to migration, displacement, instability, among other challenges and obstacles. Ms. Waad, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm going to start by providing you with a brief overview of the Global Health Institute at the AUB. It's the first Global Health Institute in Lebanon and the region, established in 2017. GHI comes in consonance with AUB's comprehensive vision on health, Health 2025. AUB addresses global health challenges with a focus on context and sustainable impact by employing an interdisciplinary approach. Our vision is not only to contextualize global health aspects, but also to make the region's voice heard in the global health dialogue that's been going on all over the globe. GHI has three major divisions: the GHI programs, tackling global health challenges through research, policy, and advocacy. GHI Assist, which is the service arm of the Institute, and GHI Academy, which is the capacity arm of the Institute. The Academy advances global health literacy and leadership by delivering innovative capacity building projects, one of which is the Mobile University for Health project. And a special thanks to Dr. Nasser Yassin, who played a key role in establishing this project. Mobile University for Health is an innovative educational model for building healthcare workforce among refugees and host communities. As mentioned generously before, the war in Syria has resulted in the worst humanitarian crisis of our time. Almost half of the Syrian population has been displaced. Syria lost around 35 years of what it had achieved of human development, with life expectancy dropping by 20 years. The healthcare sector was particularly affected. Around 70% of the physicians in Syria fled the country. In addition to that, many of the Syrian population lost so many opportunities in continuing education due to the displacement, the immigration, and the instability they've been through. So how can we reverse this downward spiral? Naturally, academic institutions must be at the forefront of rebuilding Syria's human assets, by which new generation of professionals should be equipped with the appropriate skills and knowledge in order to lead and engage in the rebuilding of the health sector, considering its relevance and significance. However, with all the difficulties and displacements the Syrian population been through, it was really hard for them to have access to these institutions and services. Therefore, we had to think of a more advanced solution. This solution had to be an out-of-the-box solution, innovative and daring, and most importantly, it had to make a difference in this complex situation. And this is where the idea of the Mobile University for Health came from. The project's aim is to identify the current health needs and priorities of displaced Syrians and host communities, to identify the gaps in health services, health training, and availability of health workforce, to develop academically based educational programs that fit the needs of refugees and host communities, and to contribute to the rebuilding of the health sector in conflict-ridden countries. So basically, this project has two stages. First is the pilot stage, which includes situational assessment and planning and initiation of the activities. After that, the execution stage of the project. So starting with the pilot stage, What we did is we made a situational assessment. We conducted the systematic review, stakeholder engagement meetings with Lebanese PHC directors and representatives, and with the NGOs and INGOs representatives. After that, we did focus group discussions with Syrian refugees in Lebanon in order to identify the most important health needs for these communities. So the result of this situational assessment came with the three major health needs: women's health, mental health, and communicable disease. And these will be the three certificates that will be provided by the Mobile University for Health project. We will be focusing on women's health certificate in the pilot phase, which is composed of 4 modular courses. What we did after that is that we started developing the pilot modular courses. We formed a curriculum development committee, including the subject matter experts over women's health. We worked closely with them on developing the curriculum. After that, we recorded and videotaped the sessions that needed to be recorded. And we launched the pilot testing on AUB campus. 5 Syrian refugee women came to AUB to participate as learners in this project. The course consisted of lecture hours, examination, and practical hours. The learners had to sit for a pre-pilot exam by which they scored an average of 59.5%. And in order to evaluate the effectiveness of this pilot certificate, learners took the exact same exam after the completion of the certificate, by which they scored an 87%. This means that there has been an increase by 30% in their knowledge and skills. Moving forward, the execution stage of this study is composed of 3 phases. Eventually, we will be delivering all 3 certificates to several cohorts in mobile classrooms. The importance of technology and innovation in our project resides in the active engagement of these learners with the learning material, by which they were exposed to various types of learning materials, videos, infographics, and so on. This enhanced their teaching and the teaching and learning experience of the certificate. The Mobile University for Health does not have any geographical limitations. We will reach a point where we will have mobile classrooms on wheels parked in communities hosting Syrian refugees. This will be a step into the globalization of this project. Finally, the outcome of the Mobile University for Health will be a competent healthcare workforce with recognized certification from the American University of Beirut, hopefully in order to support their communities and support the rebuilding of their healthcare system. Thank you.
Can I use this? Can I use this? Thank you all for an extremely rich and informative panel. May I invite our panelists to the stage? I'm very much aware of the time left, and it's the end of the day. I'm sure you must have a lot of questions as well. I'll give myself the privilege to ask the first question. Quite honestly, while you were presenting, each one of you, I think there's a breakthrough since the crisis started until today, and we all know we're talking about a protracted crisis conflict. There's a general, very positive trend in what you all presented. Each one of you in their approach and intervention, research and projects is highlighting the issue of durable futures, sustainability, quality assurance, scalability. That's beyond emergency. That's really something that I'm very happy to know more about, because I know that's a breakthrough from first when the crisis started, there was always the context of emergency intervention, whereas today we're moving towards development, finding durable solutions. However, our role here as academics is to always challenge ourselves. As Dr. Fadlu Khouri opened today with his opening remarks, the conference, he said, we can still do and must do better. So if I were to ask you a question, and in reflecting back at each one of your interventions and projects and research, and going back to the main theme of this forum, which is resilience, I'd like to remind ourselves of the terminology and the definition of resilience. What kind of resilience are we talking about in the context of a protracted conflict and crisis whereby we are entering into the 9th year now? Just a quick reminder, the definition of resilience means the capacity to adjust and cope with misfortune or change. It's the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, threats, and etc. So, while keeping that in mind, we also know that we are in the protracted conflict, hence the context that we are addressing today, in other words, means the norm. The protracted, when we're talking about 8 years and 9 years, is no longer a state of change. It's becoming the norm. That means it's no longer temporary. So if we look back at your projects, and this is the challenge, and my question to each one of you, to what extent can you ascertain that your work is still building the resilience of Syrian refugee students and community in the sense of empowerment and not in the sense of adapting to the lack of change, to the status quo, and for God forbid, to submission? So this is an overarching question, but I know that in each one of your area would apply differently. So there's so much about sustainability, future durable solution, innovation, but how can we do better? And how can we make sure that by addressing resilience, we're not actually contributing to ensure that we are adapting to the lack of change? I'll start with this. So, whoever.
Just one comment, I think, from the perspective of at least some of the students and young people that we work with, although displacement has become the norm, their daily lives change constantly, and the insecurity is different on a daily basis. So there is a continued resilience in the face of that daily change. And an example would be a young woman who received a scholarship to study psychology with the DAFI UNHCR scholarships. She graduated from our program, received the scholarship, has enrolled in her first year of psychology studies. She's very excited to be studying psychology, but one of her friends' families who received the same scholarship, they returned. And she's really struggling with the anxiety of, will she be able to accept and continue in her scholarship, or will she have to be forced to return? So it's like the insecurities that they face, they vary. Sometimes it's about their healthcare needs. Sometimes it's about their families. When you're living on a shoestring, or when you're living with very little financial means and no legal comfort or protection, every day it's a new crisis almost. So I think that I know what you're saying about the norm is a lack of change, but on sort of the micro level, there's constant change for the young people we work with. So I think that the way we aim, and I agree, we can always do better. And we do a lot of evaluation and feedback from our participants, as well as attempting to look at, more academic assessments to improve. But I think the biggest thing that we aim to do to promote their resilience is to always engage with the young people we work with based on the strengths they're bringing, and building on the positive, the things that they have learned already and the willpower that they've gained already, and then trying to give them skills to leverage that even farther. So supporting them and juggling working and going to school and managing household responsibilities, for example. And also, I think, and maybe this would be common across all of our projects because they're all educational projects, but enabling people to not give up on their dream for their education and actually trying to encourage them to dream bigger than they dreamt before. And I think this is a really tricky and dangerous thing. I would say that with the young people that we work with in our college readiness program, because in some ways, the education coming from AUB, the type of education we're engaging them in and preparing them for is not always the quality of education that they end up getting in the end. And we don't want them to say, well, this is what I'm legally allowed to do, so this is what I'm gonna major in. We want to encourage them to hold on to their dreams or dream bigger. And they have that right, as every young person has that right. And at the same time, we have to be very careful that we don't create false expectations that can then result in depression and other serious challenges. So it's a really fine tightrope that we walk, but I think it's really important. And I think our connection of our field staff, our staff who are daily in communication with the students and the young people we work with and their teachers and their instructors, they are the ones at the front lines of building that resilience. And by supporting them, then we enable them to support the young people. That's how we're trying to do it.
Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about my project. We're trying through the Mobile University for Health to compensate for the lost opportunities for continuing education for the Syrian refugees and host communities. However, it goes much further than that. We are not just enhancing knowledge and education for these certain individuals or these women who participated in our pilot studies. Rather, we are inducing this knowledge into the entire household. And normally, educated parents raise educated children. And the chain goes on and on. That's, in my opinion, is the empowerment that these communities need. Thank you.
In my opinion, resilience that you're talking about, the way I see it with the participant that we have is hope. You have educated people, the one that we are targeting. However, they are not able to do anything with their education because Lebanon is highly competitive in education and finding jobs and to be placed in a certain community or providing service. So in our programs, what we saw is we give them 3 ways to be more resilient. First is by enabling them to have better education and to have better competitive edge in order to find jobs. So the first way is enabling them to find decent jobs. And we have many examples of students who did graduate from our programs and are start working. The other way, the other route that we provided for them is that we provide them the way to continue their education. So we're providing certificate. So in some universities in Lebanon and outside, since we provide certified certificate from AUB, some of these universities did recognize these courses and they were able to continue their degree in certain university. The third one is, and we had so many of them, they need to give back to their community. So they were able to participate in schools, they were able to serve in NGOs from project management, they were able to serve from their office management, from their expertise to support other communities.
I'll be very quick just to say that education is an investment, whether it's refugees or not. And besides the return to this investment being financial, every one additional year that you are enrolled in education, you increase your income by 10%. But also there are non-financial returns to this investment, as Wad probably mentioned. But in addition to that, one of the studies that we just finished at IFI with the World Bank and Department of Education looked at the factors that impact impact children, vulnerable children, among whom are refugees, mostly in the school, whether impacting them in making a decision whether to stay at school or drop out. And the school environment emerged as the most important. So in terms of empowerment, the school, and particularly in the examples that Brooke has presented, is giving this population a safe place where they want to go to. And it's a place where they actually wish they could stay there for longer. And one of the questions we ask these kids in this study is, where do you see yourself in 3 years? And all of them would tell you, I will be in, so if they're in grade 4, they will tell you, I'll be in grade 7. If they're in grade 7, they'll tell you, I'll be in grade 10. So they see the education in their future. This is something that they want. And having a safe school environment is very important. So just a quick one.
Yeah, in our case, I mean, it's quite particular because we're graduating students from university, so we're giving them basically a passport to the world. Our students, many of them are pursuing further studies outside Lebanon and the Arab world. Many of them are working. So it's not really the challenge that the younger students who are in high schools and middle and elementary schools are facing. As far as I can see, the main concern here is what Ziad mentioned, job opportunities in Lebanon. Job opportunities in Lebanon for non-Lebanese, that's a big question mark. And whether, how many of them will be able to return to Syria or to Iraq. So that's really the major challenge that I see. Another big challenge is numbers. I mean, we'll always be limited. When I see the mind-boggling numbers of student refugees, the young people who should be in universities, and there should be a way to be able to open up more. It may cost a lot. We need more funding, more agencies getting in, and hopefully like Al Ghurair, local and regional agencies. That's the big challenge that I see.
We're opening the floor now for questions.
Thank you. Sorry, Abby Sewell, Daily Star. This question is for Dr. Ghali or whoever else wants it. So you're probably familiar with the budget issues that the ministry has been having with the school enrollment program, and that they have had to cap the number of places for non-Lebanese students. So if the situation continues, what do you think will be the impact on the gaps that you were talking about? And is there any way that you think it can be mitigated without more funding coming in from outside?
Should we take more questions and then finish, or one by one? More question? Hi.
Hi, my name's Aisha. I'm the education manager at Sombola. Since a lot of you work in tertiary education, one of the difficulties we face on the ground is, as Dr. Hanna said, tertiary education is not a luxury, but unfortunately for a lot of the vulnerable communities, it's still not a priority because they're income earners for their families, they have to focus on other things. So interventions like the MUH, which are non-traditional means, might be more effective, but do you think in the long run when it comes to credibility and things like that, when it comes to job and employment for these refugees, non-traditional interventions might hold as much value as traditional ones?
Any other question? One more? We'll take 3 questions.
Hi, this is Wenyu from University of Birmingham. I just have a specific question for Dr. Hannah Khaldi. I'm wondering if there's a data or a ratio of adult exam takers, adult exam takers who are preparing for baccalaureate exam in Lebanon. Also, whether the program, for example, the iDream program, are engaging with people who are outside the formal high school system, who are in private school or just studying on their own for baccalaureate. And whether most of the most of the NGO programs are engaging with student informal schools. Since, as I understood, quite a lot of students are having hard time to enroll in formal school over 10th grade in a morning shift. Thank you.
There's two questions that are specifically addressed to you, and
Sure.
I think the question of Aisha is open to all.
Thank you very much. In regards to the budget issue, I mean, I personally question this budget claim, because if you look at the at the influx of funds to support the education sector, and this is not limited to the crisis issue, it's quite a big budget that has been coming in and continues to come in. However, some of the donors have stopped some channels of funding, such as for the ALP, the Accelerated Learning Program, and whatnot, because the impact of such programs has not been proven. So there are questions about the qualities. So first of all, I'm skeptical of this budget claim, and what the donors are saying is that this is a recurrent claim. Every year we hear the same thing, but something to add to this is that in one of the recent discussions with the ministry, they are actually, they have lost 130,000, not 100, yeah, 130, I think around 130,000 students, or they're looking for. And so they don't know where they are, if they have returned to Syria, they have enrolled or not. And so there's also this issue of return that has also led to the loss of some students. And that's why I question again that issue of the budget. But in response to that, I think we need to address the non-formal education sector, which the ministry has been avoiding for quite some time. So, non-formal education is complementary to the formal education in times of crisis. And we cannot continue to deny those kids who go through the non-formal education, deny them access to formal education. If the formal sector is not capable of, adjusting to the current situation and accommodating all these kids, then maybe there are alternatives that we need to try to start thinking of, rather than saying you stay out of learning, not only out of school, And so this is one thing. In regards to the baccalaureate exams and whatnot, I do actually have statistics. I just don't have them on me now, but about those how many have passed through the baccalaureate and how many have passed through the brevet. And these numbers are increasing. So the ministry is foreseeing that around 4,000 students will be entering secondary school next year. These are non-Lebanese. We don't know if they are Syrian, because the statistics we receive from the ministry are non-Lebanese. And so they are saying that about 4,000 have passed the brevet and now are eligible to go into secondary. Will they actually go into secondary school? This is a very good question, because many at this age either get married or join the labor market or whatnot. And why is our program only focusing on formal education? Because we are trying to get, we have limited capacity in terms of how much we can help or how much we can do. And so we're trying to target those who are already in the pipeline to university. If we go to those who are in non-formal education, chances are that they cannot get into universities. They need the formal education, the formal certification in order to enter universities. And that's why we're focusing our efforts towards that. Thank you.
I'm going to address your question regarding the credibility and the value of this certificate that we will be providing. Of course, in these communities' situations, they live in complex and vulnerable situations. They wouldn't sit for hours for this certificate without future benefit for them. That's why the Mobile University for Health is providing recognized certifications from the American University of Beirut that would allow these learners to apply for jobs as health workers, as social workers, and so on, in order to benefit in their future and support the rebuilding of their health sector. Thank you.
Just to answer your questions, as I stated before, CEC certification are recognized by the Ministry of Education and Higher Education, and also by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But what I can add to this is that in December, hopefully, we're going to receive our accreditation from ACET, which is the Accrediting Council for Continuing Education and Training in the US. After we receive our accreditation, we'll be able to issue continuing education units, CEUs. These CEUs are recognized by the Ministry of Labor in the US, and all US-based companies will have to take these for. Each 10 contact hours will be for one continuing education unit. So after they finish our certification, because all our programs are listed in this accreditation, we'll be able to issue them from the US credit CEUs. So this will add value to their certification if you want to work on US-based or US-based NGOs or so.
I believe we've reached the end of our panel. I would like to thank our panelists again. Please welcome them again. Thank you. And thank you all for staying with us till the end of the day. Thank you.